So we have some living epistles of the Bill Snelson from those who have gone through the process of applying and going abroad. So to kick things off, we're going to start with their personal journey. Can each of you share your name, where you went on your ecumenical journey? We'll start there.
Hello everyone, my name's John Stayne, and I went to Egypt to spend some time with the Coptic Orthodox Church.
My name's Rebecca Boardman. I went to Japan to a community that was about an hour and a half north of Tokyo called the Asian Rural Institute, which is an ecumenical, intentional global community and organic farm and rural leaders training centre.
Hi everyone, my name's Ellmina Mckenzie. I went to Thésée in Burgundy, France. I think a lot of you are familiar with Thésée. It was an amazing experience. Lots of denominations from all over the world gather there, thousands each year, and it truly was a wonderful experience.
Amazing. So can you share a memorable moment or experience from your time abroad that truly encapsulates what ecumenism means to you? Who would like to kick off? Rebecca, I like your smile.
Let me take you to Japan. It's 5 o'clock and the whole community, so this is about 30 people, all ages, so participants in the training course who come from across Asia, Pacific, Africa, volunteers primarily from Europe and America, and staff gather outside the tool cupboard to clean eggs. Eggs are a really significant part of the diet at ARI. You eat them every day for breakfast. The centre also gets a lot of its income from selling eggs to within the local community. But you would gather about 20, 30 people scraping the eggs, polishing the eggs, sorting them by size. And this is something that we did every day, rain or shine. You'd find us all outside doing that together. And for me, that was an expression of our ecumenism. We had a shared task. Sometimes it was quite mundane, but actually sometimes in those mundane actions, we were able to have just great conversation. And it was incredibly fun, believe it or not. I think some of my favourite memories from my time in Japan were being with other people to clean eggs. So it's about being united in a task, staying until the bitter end, and sometimes on a Saturday when there's only 6 of you, that can take 2 hours to clean the eggs. But to me, there was something really beautiful in that expression of us being together, sharing our lives together, having a common task, and supporting each other in that, and just having lots of fun.
So I didn't have an egg experience like Rebecca. We did do work at Thésée actually, which was quite interesting. But the most memorable part, my most favourite experience there was worshipping together with all different denominations, cultures, ethnic backgrounds, people from all walks of life. I go to an NTCG church in Wolverhampton. Our worship is very Pentecostal, charismatic, but actually having moments of silent reflection and singing hymns in different languages was truly an insightful experience. One of my favourite songs was, I don't know if you've heard of it, Nada de Torbe. I'm sorry, my Spanish isn't excellent. Nada de Torbe, nada de espante, which means nothing can trouble, nothing can frighten. Those that seek God shall never go wanting. And that was one of my favourite songs there. I've even downloaded the Thésée playlist on Spotify, so if you do like their music, I'd recommend, and you've got Spotify, I'd recommend downloading it. But yeah, I just think being with lots of different people from all walks of life was truly wonderful. The weather as well was beautiful. There was a silent garden there as well, so it was a nice balance of the two. There'd be like 3 church services a day, so you'd go to worship with all others from different denominations in the morning, at lunchtime and in the evening, but then you also had times where you could go to the silent garden and, you know, sit and reflect, meditate upon the word, spend time with the Lord, which was truly wonderful. I like the balance of the two. So that was my favourite memorable experience.
That's amazing, and I'm sure everybody in the room would agree. So, John, I'm going to come to you now. How did your journey abroad challenge or deepen your understanding of church unity, and did you have a memorable moment?
Yeah, thank you. So I was only in Egypt for a few days. It was quite a quick trip for a number of reasons. including my wife was about to give birth. And I had many, many memorable moments. For me, the most significant moment was meeting with a Coptic Orthodox monk, quite a well-known one in Egypt, called Father Raphael. He was in the final 3 nominations in their last papal election, but the way they finally decide is they have a child pick out a name. So they don't vote for the winner. He didn't get chosen. But he was well known for a number of reasons. He's a man of deep prayer. And being able to meet with him when he was a younger man, when people would meet with him, he would always wash their feet before he would speak with them. Older now. And the person who was with us said, "Oh, well, I'll probably give you 15 minutes because he's old, he's tired now." He spoke for 40, 45 minutes with me and prayed. We prayed together. He wanted us to pray together. And then afterwards he said, "Okay, come with me." And so we went out, and there were people outside who were visiting the monastery who know him, and they were all like asking him to pray for them. They had sick things wrong with them or whatever, and he was sort of blessing them as he walked along. I mean, he takes us around, gets in the car, drives us around, and he takes me to his cell. And normally for monks in the Coptic Orthodox Church, right, the cell is divided into 2 parts. There's a part that you welcome people into, and then there's the private part, the secret place, right, which is where they pray, it's where they sleep. And he took me inside into the central part, into the inner part of his cell. And then not only did he do that and talk with me and pray with me again, he wanted us to take a photo in there, which was quite, I was sort of, as soon as we started going there, I was like, what's happening? And the guide who was with us, who has known him for years, he couldn't believe what was happening. So that in itself was very, very memorable, but the thing that really impacted me was the personal change in my own life that I wasn't expecting afterwards. The way I prayed changed. For about 5 months afterwards, whenever I came to pray, it was so easy. Prayer was waiting for me almost. I felt called to start, the Psalms are a very big part of the monastic life in Egypt. I started learning the Psalms. When I say that it was a life-changing trip, I really mean that in a personal way. My life positively changed. My spiritual life changed. And it wasn't something that I could do for myself. It wasn't something that I could make happen myself. It was something that I got. I was given. And I was given through contact with someone from another church.
Wow. Wow. That's phenomenal, John. And to see that your life and spirituality has changed in this way, it just gives us energy, everyone in this room, to continue. I'm going to ask that question to Ellmina and Rebecca. Was there anything in your journey that challenged or deepened your understanding of church unity?
Do you want to go first? I don't mind. What challenged my perspective of church unity was that I think we often find that we're all kind of happy in our own little church denominations and we don't branch out enough. What we need to realise is that, we are the body of Christ. We should be unified. There shouldn't be, it shouldn't be segregated us all in our own little places, but actually it's about branching out. And, this trip allowed me to branch out and be with lots of other denominations, partaking in the way that they worship, which is different to the way that I'm used to worshipping. But I think it's about having respect for other denominations, And I had some really interesting conversations with some of the people that I travelled with. So I travelled with the Diocese of Oxford down to Taizé, and we were discussing that, one of the issues that we're all kind of facing within the churches is that, there's lots of discord, disagreements on things in the sense of, one church will say this and another church will say that. And then that's why, the outer world, unbelievers, even call us hypocrites and that sort of thing. Are we actually setting an example to people that we should be, saving, essentially? And so that was definitely something that caused me to reflect. And this experience definitely allowed me to be able to have a better understanding of church unity, you know, that it's not about just being confined to a church building, but as the body of Christ, going out there, being with others, you know, having a chat, fellowshipping, worshipping, praying together, you know, it all amalgamates into one. So that definitely was my perspective.
I think for me, the reflection has come from living for 2 months in an intentional ecumenical community where Christian unity is given. And actually that's not something that we have here, and it's not something that I've experienced here. So moving from a space and a philosophy of, we know theoretically we're all united, but actually we live with these divisions, into a space where it was just given that we were united in Christ and that our community together was united in that. And I think that there's that mind shift from being one where denominations mean something to one where actually we really didn't talk too much about our denominational backgrounds as such. We spoke about our personal experiences of faith and worship and what Jesus meant to us, what God meant to us, how we engage with our communities. But it almost felt as though those barriers didn't really exist. And that is something has been a challenge to me to bring back, because actually I think I have then self-imposed some of those barriers again, coming back into my UK context. And so the challenge for me is what can I learn from Christian unity being a given, not something that is for us to work towards.
Excellent, thank you so much. Over the last 2 days, we've been speaking about cross-cultural, intercultural mission. We heard this morning that Christianity isn't Western. We heard it yesterday as well. So I want to talk to you now about your cross-cultural experiences. Did you find any unexpected common grounds with people from different cultures? And was there anything that you could share with us on your travels?
So the Coptic community in Egypt, they're a religious minority, but they're also, some degree, an ethnic minority. And just spending time with them, seeing how they navigate, you know, we were being guided around by someone who worked for a large charity in Egypt, and he was telling us, you know, the difficulties with the government, including things like the number of Copts in the country, which the government apparently suppresses. It claims it's about 3 to 5 million less than it actually is, because then it's a smaller minority, don't need to give so much attention to it, etc. And the difficulties they have. I mean, I mentioned this in the short piece I wrote for CTE, reflecting on my time, but one of the most surprising things is you see armed guards on every church, right? You can't go in the church unless you're a Christian. And I came up and the guards asked my guide, you know, oh, can they see his ID? They showed him his ID. He said, can we see your ID? And I was like, sure. And they said, well, where does it say what your religion is? And I was like, it doesn't. And the guide had to explain, no, we don't have our religion on our ID. And so, but, you know, I was wearing a cross. We were coming with someone who was quite well known in the Coptic community, so they let us in. But that expectation, the completely different expectation. The younger children who don't carry IDs with them, they show the tattoo of a cross on their wrist to be let into the church. I mean, it's quite a culturally different context of going to church than your local parish.
My experience at ARI was one where there were probably over 20 nationalities on the compound, all bringing their various cross-cultural and denominational experiences. I think within that context, for me, the kind of cross-cultural component that was the most challenging was actually a move into community living. I live in London or around London. I live a very independent life, one that is built in many ways on a lot of the need for self-sufficiency. And so moving into a community where we were community together, fully interdependent, reliant on each other for our meals and our being together, sharing all our space. We shared dorm rooms together, we shared all our social time together, our work time together. And that challenge of moving into a place where privacy is not really something that is easy to come by. So I think my cross-cultural experience was more about one of living in a community and the challenges that come with community living, being someone who in many ways is alienated from community here in the UK, I think.
It's a really interesting point about that, I guess, Western individualism and how it's infiltrated our society.
Yeah,
thanks for that.
Yeah. I think the main difference for me was the different languages. And for once, the English people were a minority. So actually there was lots of Spanish, French, Italians, Dutch, Germans, people from all over. But there wasn't actually many people that had come from England, which I was really surprised about. I thought there'd be a lot more. Maybe it was just the week that we went. So that was very interesting. But I think there was lots of similarities. Maybe one main difference, I would say, is that we had Bible study groups. So each day we would have our own little individual Bible study group. We based it on, the leader of the group and one of the monks based it on, so your language, where you were from. But then there was also like an over 25 group, so I was in that over 25 group. But yeah, even though we were from different places around the world, actually, we were able to converse quite well. We spoke about our different denominations, our different faiths, etc., which was very interesting. I think sometimes it can get quite heated when people start to speak about, their beliefs, their doctrine and so forth. But actually we overcame that with being mature. So we spoke about our beliefs and I would open the Bible and we would discuss scriptures and things like that, really. So even though, it could have been a situation where there was, a discord and no, I don't agree with that and so on and so forth. Actually, there was a lot of unity between us and respect as well for each other's beliefs, essentially. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Now, as many of you may know or may not know, this fund was actually dedicated to Bill Snelson, who was a former General Secretary of Churches Together in England, and his family made a significant financial contribution to this fund. So, thank you, Bill, for that. Now, we know that Bill was a dedicated ecumenist. In your experience abroad, was there a moment that made you think, this is what Bill would have wanted me to see or learn?
Yeah, definitely. I think for those that have been to Taizé, it is a very pro-ecumenical experience. I was quite taken aback by how many people were there, how many people would gather into the sanctuary to worship and to pray and to have service and fellowship with one another. I'm so grateful for this fund that was given to me to allow me to have this experience. But yeah, just sitting in the service, it really did make me think about, the importance of ecumenism. And I did think to myself, that this is what he would have wanted, because if it wasn't for the funding, I wouldn't have probably gone to Taizé. And that experience really did impact me positively. So that was a moment, for me. Yeah.
The motto and ethos of ARI is that we may live together. And that is something that has the kind of creation care component to it, that we may live together in harmony with all of creation, but also is about sharing life together. I'm just going to read very briefly from the founder of ARI. His name is Takami, and he wrote that this motto is profound and biblical, a gift of God, that living together, sharing life together, not just with our friends and neighbours of the present generation, but also with future generations. Sorry, I've gotten to the wrong place. Sharing life together in a holistic way requires a simple life, a simple style of life. Sharing means having less. It means to live a non-competitive, non-possessive life. And in doing this, it's a spiritual experience. By sharing in this spiritual experience, the daily differences of our religious affiliations cease to be barriers among us. I've paraphrased a lot, but we explored that idea of living together a lot during the time at ARI, both very practically in the physical actions of weeding the fields and looking after the pigs, but also in what it meant to live together. And I think that for me, that is, I hope, what Bill would have liked me to learn more of, or for all of us to learn more of. How do we live better together? And so to have 2 months in a place where we were really grappling with that as a community, both, you know, with each other as neighbours, but with the whole of the planet, with the whole of creation. Yeah, I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to just explore what that means. What does it mean to share life with each other, to live together, and to be in unity with each other?
That's so phenomenal and so countercultural. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think for me the thing that might have stood out most is actually sort of how the trip came about. So I just recently finished a doctorate in theology at Durham, and one of my fellow PhD students was a Coptic monk from Egypt who had been sent to Durham to do a doctorate in ecumenism, actually. So he did his doctorate on comparing Cyril of Alexandria with Yves Congar, and Yves Congar is one of my favourite Catholic theologians. And so when we first met, I saw him, immediately knew he was a Coptic monk. I said, "Oh, hello." We spoke. He gave me something to do with one of their previous popes that was a very kind gift to me. And so I gave him one of my Congar first editions next time we met, and then next time he gave me a gift, so I gave him a gift. Every time we met, we had a sort of ecumenical gift. And then he said, come to Egypt. When I go back, he finished his doctorate slightly before me, and so I said to him, "Listen, I've heard there's this fund. If I get money, I will come." And thank God, some months later, he was welcoming me to his monastery, although he's not abbot, but his monastery in Egypt, you know, the monastery of St. Macarius from the 4th century. So, no, really remarkable, showing me around, you know, "Oh, and here are all the monks who were killed in this time, this is where they were all buried, here are the martyrs from this century, and these are the most recent ones," and it's just remarkable. So the friendship, I think, really.
Thank you. And that's so phenomenal to hear what Bill's legacy has done. That these recipients can be sat here, and let this be an encouragement. It's not about age in this room, that the work that we're doing in this ecumenical space will have legacy and impact for generations to come. You might not see it now, but it will impact somebody in the future. So again, we want to thank Bill for his contribution. Okay, let's go to the fun side of ecumenism. Let's bring some fun into this. What was the most quirky or unexpected thing you saw on your trip? And what was the most quirky food item or meal you had that you would bring back to the OER's conference?
I actually had quite a lot of funny things I saw. The thing that was most unexpected, I would say, was, so my friend who was the monk who invited me, he told me that his mother did some work with street children. I thought, "Oh, that's nice." And he said, "Well, when you're here, maybe you could visit, you know, the things that she runs." And I thought, sounds lovely, but I mean, I've got very few days, and it's such an intense few days. Maybe I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it. Turned out we were able to. So we went, and as we drove in, the doors open, and I see a picture of his mother with all these Arab leaders. Like there's one with her with like the leaders of, you know, UAE and leaders of Dubai and with Melania Trump. I'm thinking, who is his mother? It made me think she was running this small, you know, one set of street children. She runs the largest Christian charity in the Middle East. She's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice. Slightly surprising. So yeah, I was cracking up when I saw her the next day when we visited him. I said, "Kyrillos, you really undersold your mother to me." He said, "Oh, sorry." He was really embarrassed. That was quite funny. As far as food, there was I think it was like very hot spinach soup thing that was poured while boiling from a height into a bowl, and you were sort of scared about it getting splashed on you. That was the most memorable food, I think. I'm not sure I'll bring it here though, but it was nice. It was nice.
I'm not so sure about quirky traditions. One of the things that less quirky but more fun was we would gather. Food was really, really important at ARI. The time of fellowship around eating together was key, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And before we would eat, we would all sing grace together. But what would happen is that in the dining hall, above the hatch where all the food came out of, there were 10 versions of grace pinned on the wall, some in English, some in Japanese. And so one member would just point to someone and say, "What number are we singing today?" And the whole room would belt out one of the graces before dinner. And there was one day in particular where those that were participating on the training course had just come back from their Japanese lesson and had learned one of the graces. And I can tell you the sound that came from that grace was absolutely phenomenal. But I loved it because it reminded me of primary school, it reminded me of joy, and actually, no matter where you were coming from in the morning or in the evening, to gather together and the sound of people thanking God, well, it was just wonderful, and I do miss that. In terms of food I'd bring back, so the way that it worked is that you would kind of, if you were cooking, you would go into the kitchens, see what fruit and veg and meat were around. And I was there in the spring where we were kind of eating up the end of the last year's harvest. So lots of radishes, lots of potatoes, lots of carrots. And it was your job to kind of make something. Felt very ready, steady cook at times. And people came from all over. So we had lots of different spice combinations, lots of different things. Some of the dishes were real successes. Others, including my own, not so much. So we definitely had a lot of interesting food. It was all healthy though.
I think a strange but unique experience for me was the fact that we got to spend an evening with the monks, which was very interesting. It's not something that you do every day. And we got to do like a Q&A with the monks as well, which was really interesting. We got to have a hot drink with them and just ask them about their everyday lives, you know, and their call to brotherhood, etc. So that was interesting. And on another night, I got to speak to a nun as well, which was, again, very interesting to hear about her experience and her calling into that. And then with regards to food, the food was very interesting. On the first day, I was quite shocked to see that it was a baguette and chocolate for our breakfast. And we had baguette with like every single meal. So I thought towards the end of the week, I'm going to turn into a baguette at this point. So I don't know if I'd bring it back, but it was a strange, humbling experience to say the least. So yeah.
Okay, so we know that humanism isn't always a come by our moment. It's relationships, it's people. We heard from Pastor Akko today about even conflict and conflict resolution. So we don't want to romanticize that ecumenism is always a walk in the park. It's not. It's people, it's relationships, and sometimes there is tension. Did you encounter any tension either within yourself, theologically, with the people that were there, or disagreement during your time abroad? And what did you learn? John, let's come to you.
I was pulling that face because I was thinking very hard and couldn't think of anything. I mean, honestly, no, actually. Ecumenism has been, I mean, of course, has tensions in it, feelings of tensions within us. You know, my initial feeling of being called to work ecumenically occurred in a actually Coptic Orthodox liturgy when I went up. Angelos, Archbishop Angelos now, was celebrating, presiding, and saw I was obviously not a Copt, and said, you know, feel free to come up for a blessing. And as I went up, I just felt very overwhelmed and had to leave and cried. But no, my time there was not like that. It was just very positive. I was very welcomed. Sitting, you know, near the front of the cathedral where they were celebrating the new year that was coming in with the Coptic Pope. And the people in front of us who were sort of the local, I don't know, the people who work high up in business or funding, you know, at the very front. One of them just turned around and just gave me his phone and said, "Oh, it's got all the English translations. If you need any help, just ask." And that's always been my experience, particularly with Copts. And you know, some other churches are like that, but usually because they've all been given, you know, ongoing formation on being welcoming. That's not the case there. They just saw and welcomed me. And so no, I didn't have tension. I had a very, really positive experience of just being welcomed. People giving up their time during their, liturgical celebration to help me.
Did that challenge you, or how things are done here in the UK?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've never done that for anyone else. So yeah, that's a challenge. But part of the problem, I mean, I don't look Egyptian, so I think they knew maybe I needed some help. I'm open to helping people, but in a Catholic context, which is my church background, if I turn to someone and say, oh, do you understand the liturgy? They might be offended. It's a bit difficult. I don't know how I could be welcoming in that context. Food for thought.
So every morning we would gather at 10 o'clock for a morning gathering, which was spiritual in dimension, and every member of the community had an opportunity to share. And I remember the director of the Institute, in one of her very early sessions, she said, community is inconvenience. And I think that is where some of the conflict arises. I kind of already mentioned it, but that conflict between doing what is easy and doing what is right. And so I think that is one sense. And ARI is designed to be a place where, they design it as a place where conflicts are brought to the fore. We heard earlier that conflict is not bad. You're in a very intense environment, in a very close-knit community, everything is together. The point being is that you can't, and I'm hugely conflict averse, so this was a real challenge for me. The idea being that conflict in community is good because you work through it, you reconcile, and you're stronger. And actually that was as someone who's incredibly conflict averse, a real challenge. And we worked that out. I was only there for 2 months. I'm sure if I was there for longer that would have been something much more real. But it plays out over who's doing all the washing up, right, in the communal living room, and are we leaving things tidy, and where are we putting our shoes, and are you borrowing someone's sandals to walk between the main room and the kitchen? I think that was one thing. I think the other side of it was that as a community, it was very much consensus decision making. And so we sat in large community meetings to talk about how are we welcoming the new participants. And, dining, the ways that we dined together had shifted over COVID. So are people allowed to go and take their food outside of the dining room to eat on their own or not? And this was a 45-minute conversation. And everybody was allowed a voice. And, you're not used to giving that time and that space to everybody to feel like they have been able to contribute. And so the ethos was, we go slow, but we go together. And again, that was also definitely a point of conflict for a number of community members who come from places where you just want a quick decision. Or conflict when eventually it doesn't turn your way, even though you've been able to say your piece. So I think those two things were the areas of conflict that I've brought back as things that have taught me, and hopefully I have learnt from.
That's powerful. We go slow, but we go together. Powerful.
For me, there wasn't really any moments of conflict. We had lots of rich and fruitful discussions on many occasions. I think when I was in my Bible study groups, because we were all from different parts of the world, and I mentioned earlier about how we discussed our different beliefs, our doctrines, etc., there could have been moments of tension in that situation, but we overcame that. We were mature, respectable to one another, so there wasn't really any moments of conflict for me overall.
Okay, so the next questions are going to look at the future of ecumenism. So in light of your experiences, what do you think are some of the most pressing issues facing ecumenism today, especially for young adults? Rebecca?
I think for me, one of the challenges is space and time in a society where our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and we also want instant gratification and instant results. I think my time at ARI, where things were slowed down and also were built on the kind of agricultural cycle, you have fallow land, you have times where things are in preparation, And another piece of wisdom that has stuck with me is one of the other members of the community shared that weeding is my meditation and sowing is my prayer. And actually for me, that's such a great life lesson, weeding ourselves. How do we weed ourselves as a point of meditation? And sowing, you never know if your seeds are going to sprout and how well they're going to sprout, but actually they also take time and watering and dedication. But I think that we like to think of ourselves as incredibly time poor. And I guess where are the opportunities and where are the encouragements for us to commit good time into our relationships with each other ecumenically? And I think that with technology that's only becoming more challenging. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, thank you. See a lot of nods heads in the room.
Yeah. I think in this day and age with, social media, social networks and technology taking over the world, I do think that is an issue that young people are facing in the sense of, before there'd be lots of physical contact, physical networks, meetings, in person. But I do think that now people fall heavily on just conversing, communicating through social media. And I think COVID as well has had a great impact on that, because I know in a lot of churches they still do meetings online, etc., which is good, but then also it's good to have, the physical meetings as well. So I do think that is an issue. And I just think, as well, you find that, a lot of young people, they want to, stay at home and, they're kind of on their phones and, maybe on social media or gaming and that sort of thing. Whereas, years ago, people would be out there, they'd be networking, they'd be playing and so forth with others. So I do think that, technology is kind of like a double-edged sword in the sense of, they kind of promote it as it's doing well because you can contact so many people all over the place whilst just sitting at home. But actually, I think, to really get that rich experience of ecumenism, I think it's really important that actually you go out there and you're not just relying heavily on technology and on your phone. It's about that physical contact, meeting up with people and so forth.
I personally think we're going through a really challenging time culturally. I think there's a cultural realignment going on. I think it's only beginning to play out. And we can see that definitely on the ground with young Catholics, particularly those who go to seminary. I'm not trying to be overly critical of my church, but very little interest in ecumenism. In fact, quite directly anti-ecumenical. And I think what needs to happen is, if there's not going to be in 20 years or 30 years a serious issue here, is there needs to be a representing of why ecumenism matters. It happened a lot when the Catholic Church really entered into the ecumenical movement in the Second Vatican Council. If you go back to lots of the key texts beforehand, Yves Congar's work on divided Christendom, for example, it's really explaining to people who might not be ecumenical why it matters. And that work was done then. I don't see many works like that. And understandably so subsequently, right? Things develop, you push on, you're trying to develop, push further, come closer together. But I feel like we're in a stage where we need to have some of those types of works done again. We need to almost, at least I can speak from a Catholic perspective, we need to convince a generation for the first time why ecumenism matters. It's not everywhere, right? It's not everywhere, but it is a trend, and trends, if they continue, become demographic shifts. So I think there's hard work needed.
A lot of nod heads, maybe a future topic on to come. Thanks for that. Okay, so we're now going to open the floor for any questions that anyone might have to our recipients. So we'll do that for the next 5 minutes or so. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask?
I'm just going for a jog. Who was it? I'll get to that again.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing what you did. And I think as a young person myself, it sounds very interesting, and not just interesting, very tantalizing to hear, because I'm like, oh, okay, I have to get on this. This October. I don't want to miss my chance, so turn into a baguette, so yeah. But I think one of the issues that I have echoed throughout these 2 days, and something that I shared, was something that Ellmina also touched on, which when she was speaking, and she said some of us have gotten too comfortable with our church buildings. And I think sometimes when we hear that, we think, okay, it's just, the routine. But when I was exploring it myself, I thought to myself that it's not just about the routine. I think some of us have gotten too comfortable with church allegiance, that it's like, if I have intra-faith. So we are okay with having interfaith. We are okay with, going out to evangelize to people of other faith. But intra-faith conversations, it sounds like, oh, okay, you're inviting me to come do this at your church, but I feel like I'm going to be denying mine if I come. And it feels as though when you were speaking, the trip itself and also the fund was actually a big thing in helping to change that perspective, Ellmina. So what I was thinking too was, in terms of the question that I want to ask is, if we say that we are the representation, so those who have gone on the fund, on the trip themselves, the Bill Snelson Fund, if we say that we are the representation of how to show ecumenism to others, even with staying, true to our faith, staying true with our belief, staying true to what we uphold as our doctrine, how have we seen it reflected? So how have you seen it, you three seen it reflected in your church now that you've come back? How has the conversation changed? How have you been that living witness? And has it been a positive response? Because I think one of the big things is to consider sustainability. In as much as we go out to experience these ourselves, when we come back to our churches and we share these personal experiences, do they see it as, oh, this is real? This is actually something we should all get involved in, both young and old too. Yeah.
I think for me, it was quite refreshing coming back because my pastor, he is very proactive in, ensuring that we're going out into the community, that we're reaching the lost, that we're, having important conversations with those from other denominations. So for me, it was refreshing to come back to a church where I do feel that ecumenism is actually being promoted. A few weeks ago, we had our first baptism in the park, which was wonderful. A few weeks prior to that, we had another church service in the park, someone gave their life to the Lord, so it was really, truly wonderful to see that. I do recognise that, NTCG, it is a very large organisation. There's lots of churches around the UK from NTCG. So it is something that maybe we need to work on a national level. But I know that on a local level at my church, they are doing a lot. So I did feel that it was quite refreshing coming back to that. What about yourselves?
I think from what you're sharing, there's a sense to which there's sometimes a fear in speaking to someone from a different place because it might change us and transform us. And to me, there's joy in that because I know that my vision of God is so limited. And actually every single person I engage with, whether they're in my own tradition or in a different tradition or even in another faith tradition, probably can show another part of God to me if I'm open to that. But I think that sometimes can be scary because sometimes I think there is sometimes a sense, particularly if you are, you do come from a particular tradition of thinking, well, actually, if I change, am I then less of this? And that can be a bit scary. But actually, my experiences of experiencing different expressions of Christianity is ones where actually I then see the joys in my own tradition more, as opposed to the things that other people do more. And actually I probably am someone who's overly cynical about the Church of England, and actually then going to other expressions, I come back and I re-find the things that bring me joy and help me see God in my own expressions of worship. And I think I am more engaged in my Anglican service on a Sunday now because of my experience in other traditions, as opposed to being less engaged with that. So it's definitely enhanced my Sunday mornings. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my immediate context is very pro-ecumenical. So they were really hungry to hear my experience, to draw from it. Some of them, when I said, oh yeah, one of the things was, as I mentioned earlier, was I just felt I should start learning some of the Psalms and praying the Psalms. One of the people I told said, oh, I'm going to do that as well. So, I mean, yeah, definitely there's fruit. But I mean, my experience was very personal, and it's not something that you can just easily pass on. But as far as I can, I try, and people have been receptive in my local area. So.